please let me know if the cutting in and out continues. In any case, I think you're all familiar with AP Insight, so we don't need to go over all parts of it now. You know, of course, about the challenge areas, which are the areas that are difficult to teach and difficult to learn. And there are 10 of those, as you know. And AP Insight uses formative assessments in order to identify where students misunderstand, where you can tell what they know, what they don't know, what they understand, what they don't understand, what they can do, what they can't do. And there's several pieces to this. And I'm trying to get my papers back in order. Hold on a moment. If you'll notice, it's like the 4 stages of the challenge areas, and within the challenge area, the building blocks are all linked together. They're specially linked together, tied together. They don't exist separately. Prepare begins the circle, and ACT closes the circle, and they're dealing with the same student issues of misunderstanding and understanding what is difficult, and so on for them. And the key to the ACT resources will first be feedback that the students receive from AP Insight, which gives it to them right automatically. We'll just note at this point that it's students that reflect on their misunderstandings, on the formative assessment, on the results they get back from the formative assessments. So the first key is to reflect, and you see that in the right-hand side, and then act. So reflect and then act. Moving on, as far as the feedback, which is again the key to this, the first step in the ACT process is receiving feedback. And the feedback the students receive comes from the formative assessments that accompany the building blocks within the challenge areas, as well as the overall challenge area assessments. We want students to be able to process the feedback, not simply receive that. And in order for that to be useful, the feedback has to be useful to the students in order to have the best chance to increase learning and understanding of the topic and skills at hand. So the 3 keys to feedback being useful are that it is timely. In other words, not a day or several days later, but right there at that moment, and Insight provides that feedback. If you've done assessments, you know already, provides that feedback directly to the students upon completion of an assessment. And the other is that, well, the 2 others are that they are specific. The feedback is specific, means it's specifically targeted at the misunderstandings. So it's not, vague or overly general feedback. That's not really very helpful. And it also, the feedback, students know they can see what the next step that they need to take is, so that they can either overcome the misunderstandings, gain the skill they are still practicing, what have you. Okay. Although all of these things that have just appeared on the screen on the left provide feedback from AP Insight to the students, we're going to focus on the next steps guides and the ACT resources. First, how do you get the quiz results? And I'm assuming this probably all of you have done this, and if not, we're going to walk through it now in any case. You can see your students' building block quiz results under the Assessments tab, right there on the upper right-hand side. And when you click on the Results tab, if you see Results tab has just, the arrow is pointing to it, you'll see the assessment you have already assigned and get an overview of student performance. And for any given assignment, the bar on the right gives you a quick visual breakdown of how students performed on the assessment. It's divided into red, yellow, and green, and each colored section shows the number of students who performed at that particular level. A red naturally indicates students have multiple misunderstandings, yellow that the results were mixed, and green that they understood and demonstrated success on most or all of the questions. Along with this, you'll see all the way to the right an overall performance level for your class, the colored square or circle. At this point, we'll look more closely at one quiz, and it's from period 6 and deals with labor strategies and change in continuity over time, which is building block B within the economic reform movement's challenge area. There are 3 questions on this particular assessment. 2 are multiple choice questions, and the third is a short answer question, which is pretty typical of the building block quizzes, although some are only multiple choice, as you know. We'll look specifically at the first multiple choice question, which has to do with industrialists and labor unrest. Let's take a look at that. You would click on a particular question, bring up, what it does is it brings up the question as well as the correct answer, and there you can see how many students chose each answer. And then an explanation is provided as to what it suggests about the student's understanding for those who've gotten the correct answer. And what you may have noticed about students' answer choices for this particular question, if you look here, it looks, and this is one my own students did, it looks as though the good majority of the students understood and demonstrated that they did understand the excerpt and were able to choose the correct answer. That was in classroom performance. If you were to click on student performance instead, if you follow the arrow there, you'll see your students' names. Mine are blocked out here, as well as each student's answer choice for each question and whether it was correct. And if you haven't used this yet, this matrix does give you really instantaneous, assuming you're doing this in class as a whole, instantaneous information, feedback on your students' results. And in this case, I can see that, part A of the short answer question, that my students really misunderstood that and weren't able to, even the higher level students weren't able to get the right answer. When you click on a correct answer choice, you'll see the question and the corresponding explanation about likely student misunderstandings. When you click on an incorrect answer choice, you'll see the question, the correct answer indicated with a green check mark, and, I think that was no, there it is, answer with the green check mark, and the student's incorrect choice. So had we clicked on the A back there, this would have shown up that students two of these students selected that answer, A, which was incorrect. But why was it incorrect? What does it suggest about what they understood, or knew, or didn't understand and didn't know? Okay, which is very helpful to you as a teacher, but they also get the same information. So being provided with the explanation for what the student may misunderstand and struggle with is very helpful information. And if it were, what was the other one selected? If we had clicked on a student who answered D, then we would get the explanation for that, why that was incorrect, and why, more so, what it would suggest about students' understanding or misunderstanding at that point. What can you do to help students who have this misunderstanding? So this is the question at this point, what could you do as the teacher to work with these students, or give them an activity or a next step so that they can overcome the misunderstanding, or at least begin to chip away at it? Well, one activity I have done is to group students by incorrect answer and have them work together to discuss the possible misunderstandings and what they would need to do in order to overcome them, sort of a small group discussion. This is true also of the students who got answers correctly, because it's important that they can express why what they answered was correct. Not only that it was correct, but why it was correct. Let's move to the next slide. Where would you be able to find all these misunderstandings and resources for that particular quiz? Well, you can access all of that, the misunderstandings, the recommended next steps, and the ACT resources for the quiz by clicking on the resources link, there it is, from the dashboard. It's on the left-hand side, as you can see, and then that brings up all the misunderstandings, possible misunderstandings, and the resource, the ACT resource and recommended next step that goes with that. I probably should pause for a moment and see if anybody has questions up to this point. I'll remind you we do plan to be able to have hopefully about 25-30 minutes for discussion and questions, but if anybody at this point has an appropriate question, then please, by all means. I see Shannon is typing. So let me pause for a moment. That's a good question, Shannon, and unless you are grading them in real time, which is possible, I have not been able to do that yet. The feedback is going to have to be, I would think, unless you can score it, all of them quickly, I would think either for the next class period, which, right, you're right, that takes away the timely part, or something that they can do that day, and you give them a deadline, I don't know, 9 p.m. or something. And I have done things like that when the assessments, when we're not able to finish the assessment in class, then I do have them do that for homework, and I give them pre-instructions on the what to do with the feedback and the next steps. But it is equally important for the FAQs, right? Because that's a large part of the exam as well. Saul, do you have any advice on immediate feedback for the FAQ?
No, my similar to you, Janine. I've tried to make the students or try to encourage the students as a homework assignment to do the SAQ so that I can go in the next morning and immediately grade them before their class starts. I'm fortunate that my A-push classes are in the latter part of the day, so I actually have two opportunities to sit and grade those assessments, and so that time permitting at the start of class, they can log in on our class set of iPads when I can get them, and they can check to see what's going on in terms of what they did.
Yeah, I think also, if I'm not mistaken, students have the ability, teachers can utilize this option. You can say yes, no. No, of course, AP Insight, I'm reading what Shannon has written. Of course, AP Insight will give the immediate feedback, excuse me, on the multiple choice questions, but not the short answer unless you have the students score their own SAQ themselves. And I think I can't really stress enough. I find that extremely helpful for students, because not only are they scoring their own SAQ and seeing where perhaps they need to overcome something or change something, they can also see when you use that, then they can see what answers would be acceptable for that particular SAQ for A, B, and C. And I might be mistaken. I think they have you have to use a certain setting, but I believe they can score their own. If not, I suppose then the only other option, because I really do like students scoring their own, I think it really gives them the opportunity to understand what is being looked for, and whether they responded accordingly. I suppose you could always print that out and share that with students, but I believe, I could be wrong, that there is an option for students to score their own. And no, you weren't missing anything, Shannon. Moving along, as far as the student view, and if you're wondering what the students can see, they can see almost exactly what you see as the teacher. On their dashboard, they see the question, the correct answer, their incorrect answer, and the explanation, again, of the possible misunderstanding or misunderstandings. They also have the next steps guide, the blue arrow there, and they can link to the ACT resources or recommended next steps there, and there that is. So here we're looking at what students can do with the next steps guide, because the next steps guide is not geared toward a specific building block. It's a template. It's a blank template that students can use to record their reflections on, because again, with the feedback they receive, the first thing for the students to think about is to take a moment to reflect, or maybe a couple moments, a few minutes, and see why they answered a certain answer, whether it was correct or incorrect, and if it was incorrect, what that might indicate about a misunderstanding. So the next steps guide gives students the opportunity to reflect on what they've learned, as well as to commit to the next steps that will help them overcome those misunderstandings. And this exercise develops within students the ability to recognize when they struggle and to figure out ways to fill the gaps in their knowledge independently. So this allows us to be more student-driven, which is one of the goals. So independently, not independently, just figure out ways that they're going to try to overcome the misunderstandings, but those would be provided for them. The first thing is they write down the reflection for every question, whether they got it right or not. We all know students sometimes guess on the questions they got right, so the reflection step is to help students strengthen their understanding of the reasons their response was the correct response. You will probably need to, and there's where they would fill in the reflection sheet. Again, it's not geared toward us. It's a general form that you can use for any building block that you have completed or that the students have completed. You'll probably need to model the reflection process for students, especially in the beginning. And many students will need to see examples of reflecting and what they are expected to write about. So many of them don't know just instinctively what you are expecting from them if you are using this. I'm looking for, I have a student sample here myself, which, having moved to a new location, I cannot seem to put my hands on, but I can tell you I don't use it all the time. I do use it, I pick and choose the quizzes, but the students have gotten used to using it and reflecting, which is, I think, a wonderful thing for students and probably teachers alike. And it's a step that I wouldn't skip. I would at least teach them how to do this. But the one student I was talking about, he filled it out for actually this question. I was looking it over with him. He got both questions correct, but he was able to describe in some detail his process for selecting an answer, and it was process of elimination. Plus, he specifically said what he knew and what he didn't know. There was a great example of answering a reflection question and filling this out. So we're still in the process. Not all students of mine are comfortable with it, but it does take practice and time and the teachers modeling how to do it. So again, as I said, I don't do that with every quiz. Some students, some teachers may do it with every quiz. I don't know about, perhaps let me pause and ask you guys in this group, do you use the reflection piece? Do you use the next steps guide and have the students write down the reflections? If you want to respond in chat, that would be fine. Have you thought about it, Shannon? Is there a reason you haven't? Is it time? Haven't considered it? Yeah. Finding that the time to do everything adequately enough that it's actually useful is probably the biggest challenge I think most teachers have. Most teachers have with it. That's the biggest challenge is the time question. Saul, do you use the reflection piece with your students?
I've used it intermittently. I've tried to make it something that the kids do on their own. Usually when we have finished doing the assessment, they've gotten the feedback. I've asked them to take out the reflection piece and just to do a little journaling with it. Um, but again, for some of the same reasons that um, Katie noted, is time. Um, I
Yeah.
have a particularly short class period of 40 minutes, so that makes it really tough.
Right, right. And that's true. Probably some of our group here teach in 40 to 45, 50-minute blocks, and some of us in the 90-minute blocks. I guess the 45-minute classes or the 90-minute blocks. You know, there's still so much to do. I don't know that that really makes a difference. You do have to be creative in fitting it in, I think. Um, I thought Katie was responding there. Okay. You do have to be creative in fitting it in, and it may be something that is used, as you said, Saul, intermittently. Okay. I understand, Katie. It's funny. But I think this research suggests that the reflection exercise does, in addition, help prepare students for success in college. I mean, it is a good practice to do. And when you question your own thinking or ways of doing things, I think in general. But even if students get only minimal exposure to this type of analysis and self-reflection, I think it's a helpful introduction to the skills that will be important to them later in high school and in college and probably in life. It's a good habit. In any case, there's also a teacher version of the Next Steps guide that provides an opportunity, for teachers to reflect about their practice as well. FYI. This was the ACT resource right here. This was the ACT resource for CCOT and labor strategies, which was the building block and the quiz and the assessment that we had been discussing. So the ACT resources includes activities and tasks that target particular and specific misunderstandings and struggles that students may have had based on their responses to the quiz questions. And just as a note, ACT resources are meant to be brief assignments, taking about 15 minutes for students to complete, as opposed to a performance task building block activity, the teaching piece of it, for instance, which takes about, or is supposed to take about 45 minutes. So the ACT resources, again, brief assignments, about 15 minutes. And how you might, again, it's not prescriptive. It's up to you how you have your students using these. And what your expectations are, and whether they choose which resource they will complete, because sometimes recommended next steps, there could be more than one thing. In this particular one, again, I don't think I have that paper in front of me anymore, but the idea was to make sure students understood that they had to back up their argument with specific evidence. It also, maybe students misunderstood or mixed up change and continuity. This form, which I don't know how well you can see it, addressed those things. It had students, the information it expected students to fill in to finish the chart, address those misunderstandings. And so the question of giving over general information as opposed to specific evidence, making sure the evidence linked back to the argument. So that chart worked on all those things. That's just one example. And again, you also see the bar here. Um, check the student can see. I'm sorry, not the student, but the teacher can see immediately. Visual check how many students. So again, in this particular question, for this particular question, the majority of students got it right, but you would also, regardless of what the answer is, I see 7 that had not finished it at this time, and this is one of mine. They have finished it, and sometimes what I will do, again, I think I've said, if particularly if the students are doing the assessment for homework or it's to be done that night, what I like to do, and again, there are many different ways of doing it, is it's because it's formative assessment and it's about learning. I don't make it a summative test that okay, the grade is based on mastery, because the point is not to show mastery so much as discover where students need to work on mastery. So I don't, the point of it is not to penalize them, I suppose is the best way to say it, for wrong answers, but to help them. How do they then get credit? Well, for me, it's either the assigned reflection piece, correct or not correct answers, and in answers, a next step has to be completed, whether I assign it or they self-assign. And then the credit is given for completing that. Saul, did you want to chime in on how do you grade these? Do you give a grade at all?
No, I don't give a grade. The grade is doing the assignment. So I treat the formative assessments here as homework assignments. If they're assigned out for homework, and then like you do, Janine, I my students are a mixed bag. So homework completion is sometimes an issue. So I use the recommended next step for the student as an extra credit assignment so that they can help their grades out. I have a lot of
Okay.
struggling readers in my classes, so they struggle with the material.
No, I understand. And again, it's not prescriptive there, as teachers can use things the way that works best with their class, and it may even within a teacher's groups of classes, I suppose you could be doing different things. Although I think probably most of us have similar groups of students in our classes throughout the classes. Um, so. As far as the discussion and share out, I've gone a little bit over, and I apologize. And I apologize for the early problem with my computer. But what we would like to do is hear from you guys. And let me give you guys all microphone rights. There you are. And here are some of the questions that we might think about now. And if you've used the Next Step guides and or ACT resources, how have they been beneficial to you and your students? It says, please type responses in the group chat. You're welcome to do that, or you can also speak through your microphones. And if you've not used the Next Steps guides and or ACT resources, why not? Why not? If you don't mind sharing, Saul and I would be happy to listen and address any concerns. Oh, Katie, I'm sorry. Is that true of? I know Saul can hear me. Can others still hear me? Okay. I do apologize for that. I'm not sure why the audio is not working as well as it should be. But once again, if you have any comments you'd like to share about your use of the Next Steps guide or the ACT resources, we would welcome those for sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Hear me, Saul?
Yes. Yes. I was going to say, like, I've been using Insight this year. I find it on some levels I find it very helpful for the students. On other levels, it's pretty it can be pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of material, which I think is good. It gives you a good choice of what you want to use. I think when I started out in the beginning of the year, I was very optimistic that I could do, 5 or 6 of the challenge areas, but I slowly found I just didn't have the time to do that. So I've kind of narrowed it down to 2 this year, and then I'm going to kind of reevaluate at the end of the year to see if I can add some next year. The kind of the assessments I have found helpful, but I think maybe Saul might have alluded to this if I was listening correctly. That I've been using those quizzes kind of as the building block quizzes as quizzes for my class that students do on their own time at home, but I haven't been using the Next Steps guides or the resources because I really don't have time in class. We're kind of working on skills and seminars and writing, so I just don't have the time for it. So I enjoy the Insight. I think it's the building block activities are great. And then the quizzes that go along with them are great. And I love the way the students get feedback on it. I just wish I had more time in my curriculum to kind of fit in a lot more of the formative part of it.
Mark, that was you, right? Speaking, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. And have you considered or have you tried or maybe you've considered and rejected the idea of using the Next Steps for homework at all?
Yeah, I'm kind of limited on my homework for my students. The way my course is structured is that they are doing content at home. So they're reading about a chapter a week. So outside of their chapter reading every week and then some seminar documents that they read once a week, I try not to give any other homework so that they can kind of manage their time well, as opposed to try to reading, 60 pages of a chapter and doing Cornell notes for me on a Sunday night. So I try to limit what I give during the week. There have been times when I've given them some of the building block parts of the building block activities to do at home, then we come back into class and work on those. But it's definitely been few and far between.
Yeah, and I think the thing there, Mark, and perhaps everybody will agree, is that those of us that have been teaching have have thought and genuinely prepared, and it's a lot of preparation and use things we like and know work. And when we sometimes try to, just add in Insight, then that can be difficult. I think the trick for myself included, this being my first year as well using it, is trial and error throughout the year. Mark, you said you got down to 2 challenge areas. I with planning over the summer reduced to 5. But that I've had to skip here and there, but 5 I thought was reasonable for the first year, and it's been tight. It's been I understand what you were saying.
Yeah, I'm a insight consultant also, and I remember the training in Chicago we talked about. The only way this program works is if you really get. It's not something you can just open up and say, "Hey, what am I doing today?" So you're really going to kind of embed it in your pacing and in your curriculum. And the thing that I found at the beginning of the year was I tried to kind of embed about five of the challenge areas and the building blocks. And the building blocks took me longer in class to cover than I thought they would. And so I was kind of bleeding over into other periods. And that's when I made the decision to say, okay, let me just kind of really narrow this down to like the challenge areas that I know traditionally my students struggle with, like the economy and government and some other things like national and American identity. But um, I found it very helpful. I as of right now, I definitely intend on using it next year as well. Um, I think that teachers really need to decide, um, you know, how much of the program is really reasonable, for you to use. Because, like you said, there's certain things that we all teach. I've been teaching the course for 9 years, so there's certain things that we all know that work. And so, how do you kind of supplement what you're doing with the Insight program? I mean, the one thing I would say is not to just use, the building block activities, because without the quiz parts, I don't think that students get, they won't get the feedback that they need to see, if they're mastering the understanding or not.
And if I may, Mark, I think that goes back to the point I mentioned earlier about it really being a circle, and when you take out pieces of it, it's not a genuine circle anymore, and they link together in ways it's a lot of information to digest, right? But they link together in ways we may not even see, from prepare to act, and act closing the circle. But I agree with you that certainly without the assessment, because that's the piece that I think makes Insight so worthwhile, that it is able to respond to students quickly, and then again have the ACT resources available, the misunderstandings, again finding time it's understood, but maybe starting with even trying it for one, Mark. I don't know, just and seeing if that would work for you.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I got to consider for next year as I kind of plan out to figure out. I think what's probably going to end up happening next year is I will probably go with the two challenge areas that I've worked with so far this year, because so far they seem to be working pretty well, and that should free up a little more time. I think I got caught at the beginning, just trying to jam. I think I had 5 or 6 of them, and then about by about the middle of
Right.
mid-October, I thought this is crazy. Like, I'm going to end up just doing Insight stuff, and that's it. And that's the
Right.
purpose of the program anyway.
I think it's not so much an supplement or but it can take the place of, but that does require a lot of advanced planning, and it may require just getting through the year, and then doing your own summer reflection, like that worked, that didn't work, I'm really going to focus in. I guess the danger is that picking like pieces here and there, you're not going to get the full effect of what Insight is supposed to be.
Yeah, and that's
Does
why that's
anybody?
why I chose. Yeah, now I was just saying
Right.
that's why I chose. I went through and I picked the challenge areas that I knew, I could get through the year, and then I knew that in
Yeah.
past that students struggle with, and then I just kind of
Hmm.
stuck with them and committed myself to do it all the way throughout the year, and then kind of reevaluate over the summer.
Understood. Understood. Does anybody have questions for me about anything to do with the next steps guides, and the next steps resources, and the ACT resources? And you can type or speak.
Janine, maybe you can just start. You seem to have used some of these Next Step Act resources in class a little bit. Maybe it would be helpful for folks to know when the students have done them, do they turn them back into you? Is it an assignment that you've had them do outside and then bring back into class, or is it something you've gone over with them in class?
So I have the same issues that everybody else has, and that is finding the time, in class time, to do that. And I'm also pretty conscious about not overloading them with work, as Mark was saying, and I know you were saying earlier. But again, not having the time in classes, I have assigned it to students, which again, they could either pick which resource they were going to use if there was a choice, or there would be, I would say, find the, pick the next steps activity for the misunderstanding you've had. For example, that chart, so if they got that question wrong, I think it was two questions that would cause it, two questions. If they got the incorrect answer, it would suggest the chart. And they have completed it and brought it back. Now, I do give them, for example, it depends, but say 10 out of 10 points. 10 out of 10 if they've successfully getting it wrong is no shame and no problem. But if they successfully complete the next steps, which all of them that have been assigned it have, maybe they're very concerned about their grade, I think. Maybe that is why. But I've also assigned some of the building block work as homework to do before we do a particular building block in class. And the last one was something that had to do on CCOT and populism, which is the role of the government. No, it's the, excuse me, economic reform movements, which I chose as one that I thought was students would struggle with, that they did struggle with. But in any case, to answer your question, so most of that is done at home, or if they stay after school in my room, they can do it then.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? I want to give everybody a fair shot, and then we'll move to, I wanted to show you also, maybe you've already discovered it, the Share What Works, the online community that is run by an AP Insight consultant. I think it's Chad, what's his last name, Saul?
Oh gosh, Mark, maybe do you remember?
Is it Hoagie? Hogue?
Yes.
Anyway, yeah, that's it, right? So it's an AP Insight consultant who monitors that and answers the questions. And I think a number of people have asked, I know have asked questions there, gotten responses. He's very conscientious about it. So anything or any comments you'd like to make, and that's just within the AP Insight community, not the AP community as a whole. AP Insight for U.S. history. Okay, and it says here, please complete the feedback survey link provided in group chat. I am about to provide the link to you in group chat. Hold on. Delete that. And if you don't mind filling it out, I think I have that right. Oops, did I put a space in there? Sorry. Let me try then. There we go. If you would kindly fill the feedback survey. And any other questions? I'll be available for about the next 10 minutes. If anybody would like to type a question after you're done with the survey or before you do it, or just use your microphone. And while you're doing that, there's actually one more thing I meant to point out as far as resources to help close the gaps or overcome the misunderstanding students may have, your students may have. And this may be just if you have a feeling students haven't gotten the idea or still struggling after a building block is completed. At the end of each building block is a close the gaps, a page that talks about closing the gaps in different, they mention or recommend different readings, different videos, different websites students can go to, or specifically practice a certain skill. They can check out this resource or that resource. So it's not an ACT resource or an after or next steps, but it is right at the end of the building blocks. So for each building block, you'll see some suggestions about closing the gap in student knowledge, understanding, or skills. And I found those to be quite helpful as well. Yes, so?
Oh, hi. This is David, actually.
Oh, David, hi.
No, that's fine. I haven't used the mic before, so I don't want to. Our district just purchased the system this year. Just as
David, could you speak up a little bit?
sorry. One second.
Or type?
Better? That's not better.
Yes, it is.
Oh, okay. Our district, and we actually just discovered that recently, and what I was curious about is are there, I guess, reps or anything that districts walk. I the system before, and it was really interesting, and I'd like to, if possible, earlier that I probably have to sit down, set aside some time,
David, I'm losing you completely. Is there any, oh, thank you, Mark. You have a great evening, too. But David, would you mind typing that? You cut out. It's probably what I sounded like earlier. Your microphone must have cut out. Thank you, David. Thank you for attending, Rob. Have a good night. And Shannon and Katie, any questions? And David, I hope you're going to type your comment. Oh, good. Well, thanks for coming, Katie. Have a good night. Okay, David, let me see. There are, David, there are, where is your district? I suppose that would be the first question. Because you can ask for for your district, you can ask for a workshop that goes about 6 hours. And the consultant would go through the entire insight process. So 6 hours is quite a long time. Go through, take the time going through what each piece is for and how to execute it and so on. So definitely, I think that is available. Yeah. Saul, would you say Ivana for that? Saul? Oh. To help David, would that be Ivana to get in touch with? I don't know what happened to Saul, but I'm going to type her name, David. Ivana Cullinan. Oh, good. Of AP, oops, AP Insight. Yeah. What happened to your microphone? Saul, are you out also? David, where is your district, David? If you don't mind sharing. Okay. David, I did 2 insight trainings in Florida over the summer and one in Atlanta in the fall. So I know definitely we've been in those areas. One was in the Panhandle, though, and one was on the East Coast by Daytona. But Southwest Florida, yeah. Yeah, if I felt comfortable switching to, actually, David, I think if you use this email address right here and ask about that, and I think you could direct that to Ivana Cullinan, and she sets everything up. So absolutely, especially for the district, I think that's a wonderful idea. And the insight trainings I've done, David, they've often been, they bring people from all over that area, from different high schools. So it sounds like that would probably be similar. I don't know how big your district is, but we often have district and county directors, social studies directors, advanced studies director, as you are, coming as well. Yeah, and David, just to mention that, and Saul chime in, but I think it being late in the year to begin get your feet wet, of course, with it this year. But I think the key will be the preparation done over the summer. The advanced preparation, which is the strategic planning. So if you're going to do that, I would suggest you probably pick a springtime date or early summer, maybe. Saul?
Yeah. So again, if you contact AP Insight, David, you do get a 90-minute webinar that's part of the package that your district purchased, and those are also scheduled through AP Insight.
Is that a one-on-one, Saul? Is that like personal? Is that something else?
It's part of the package. They're scheduled by the.
Oh, okay.
They're scheduled by the packet.
And he would.
By Ivana.
And his teachers could attend, right?
Yes. Yeah, I've done a couple.
I agree, David. I think the webinars.
Yeah.
But David, to what you're saying, I think that's I think that is the best way. But the webinars Saul is mentioning are a good way to in the meantime for teachers to get their feet wet.
Just to get started.
What's that, Saul?
To get started, it's a good way to get started.
Yes. Yeah, wonderful. Nice to meet you, David. Have a good night.
Thank you.
You too. Saul, are you going to stay for a moment?
Yeah, I can.